Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. Folks, I am so excited today. I have a very special guest with me today, and let me tell you, I learn from every guest. And my guest today is no exception. Matter of fact, I really learned a lot from reading his wonderful book. With me today, I'm going to tell you background, is Eric Drooker. I hope I'm saying your last name right, Eric.
That was right.
Oh, good. Drawings and posters are a familiar sight in the global street art movement, and Eric's paintings appear frequently on covers of The New Yorker. Born and raised in New York City, he began to slap his images on the streets as a teenager. Since then, Eric's reputation as a social critic has grown and has led to countless editorial illustrations for The Nation, The New York Times, The Progressive, etc. His first book, Flood, a novel and pictures, won the American Book Award, followed by Bloodsong, soon to be a major motion picture. His graphic novels have been translated into 7 languages. After designing the animation for the film Howl, Eric was hired by DreamWorks Animation. His art is in the permanent collections of many museums, including the Whitney Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, the Brooklyn Museum, and the Library of Congress. He lives in San Francisco Bay Area, and Eric is here to talk about his new book, Naked City, a graphic novel, which is my first graphic novel to read, and I'll tell you what, I was simply touched emotionally, intellectually. This was so amazing, and what a talented person you are. Welcome, Eric, to Chatting with Betsy.
Hey, thank you, Betsy. Thanks so much for having me today.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Eric, I just loved your book. I never read a graphic novel, and I didn't know what to expect. And I have to tell you this, folks, I can't even draw a straight line with the ruler. So when I meet someone like Eric and read his book, the talent that you have to do the drawings, to do the wording, it's just incredible. So I want to ask you, how did you come up? How did you get motivated to write Naked City, a graphic novel?
Yeah, well, most of it is visual. I always think of it that way, that the visual language it was really my first that language. Pictures were my first language because I was drawing and painting when I was little, a couple of years before learning how to read and write. I think most of us have that experience, that pictures are our native tongue. And, of course, human history, you go back through art history, we've been painting pictures on the walls of caves for tens of thousands of years. And last count, it was at least 45,000 years we've been making these beautiful, very modern-looking paintings of animals on the walls of caves. But we've only been developing verbal language and written language, alphabetic language in the last few thousand years. So I think that it repeats, recapitulates with each individual. We start out with the visual, making pictures, and then we gradually are socialized into communicating verbally. And in this book, this graphic novel, I was able to use both words and pictures because graphic novels use that language, the language of comics, really. With panels, you read from left to right, but it's a series of images, and then the words are usually in the form of dialogue, in word balloons, and thought bubbles. You could actually see and listen in on what the characters are thinking. Sometimes what they're thinking contradicts what they're saying in the word balloon. And then you could even use captions if you want. These are all the grammar of comics and picture storytelling. So graphic novels use that. It use the language of comics that we learn as kids, but then it really extends it to its logical outcome where you could tell a long-form story. Well, like this one, Naked City is well over 300 pages, right? So you realize after a few dozen pages, whoa, this isn't just a comic book. This is, in fact, I'm going to have to get a bookmark and continue this later because this is turning into a novel-length story. Oh, and the subject matter isn't particularly for kids. It's a more adult theme. It's a story about adults, and there are funny things happen. It's ultimately a comedy. I'm calling it a comedy, but also serious things happen. So it has a more mature theme than you'll find in a comic book. And that's what I love about this form of graphic novels, which is a relatively new art form, is that it's wide open. It doesn't have to be funny. Comic book implies that it's comedy, it's funny, but graphic novel, it could be anything. It could be serious, it could be a memoir, autobiographical, right? It could be historical, there are graphic biographies coming out. This one, Naked City, this story that I'm telling here, it took me a few years to complete. It's partly autobiographical. The painter character is kind of a caricature of yours truly, a younger, more naive version of myself, I suppose. But the protagonist is a young woman who's based on a couple of different women. A couple of girlfriends I had over the years, one of whom hitchhiked across the country when she was a teenager. I think she was only 18 or 19. She hitchhiked across the whole country with her dog, Siddhartha, who was half pit bull, half Doberman. So no one messed with her. She hitchhiked all the way to the East Coast and moved into this abandoned building in West Philadelphia, squatted it, invited her friends to move in and fix it up with her. And that was when I met her, and I was so inspired by her story that this again, the protagonist is largely based on this woman I knew, Janessa. In Naked City, I'm calling her Isabel, though, and she's a young musician who hitchhikes to the big city with a guitar and with the dreams in her head that she's going to be some kind of singer-songwriter. But she has to just play music on the streets and down in subway stations, and that's also based on people I knew growing up in New York City, the various street musicians who actually supported themselves playing music in public.
Yes. Actually, back in the older days, people all the time they do it now too, but, singing in the subways and coffee houses to get noticed, make some
money.
They'll
have their hat there,
yep.
Or they'll pass the hat around after, or they'll just have their upturned cap there at their feet while they're playing their instrument. People will be tossing coins in as they walk by, and then after a few hours, they have some change. I had done this for a while myself, so that's another autobiographical element, playing music, banjo in my case, clawhammer banjo down in the subway stations in New York City. And I found that I was able to earn enough, as much money that way as I would be just working some minimum wage job. I was able to earn more money just playing music down there. And when you're playing music down on a subway platform, okay, that you're interrupted every 5 or 10 minutes when the train comes in. But hey, this is just practice. You're just rehearsing. You're just working on your chops or getting better and better playing down there. Meanwhile, people are paying you a little bit of money just to rehearse. So that's the way I looked at it, and a lot of street musicians look at it that way, that they're just improving. One secret, this is kind of an open secret, people don't realize when they pass street musicians on the sidewalk or in the subway, they think that these people are completely desperate. And sometimes they are, but many of them are professional musicians who are just practicing. They figure, well, if I'm going to be practicing several hours a day, I might as well go down and practice out on the street. And it'll force me to play nice and loud, and I'll be playing as well as I can because I'm trying to please get the ear of the public, and then I want to get feedback from the public, and they make a little money while they're at it. So that's something a lot of people don't realize, is that these street musicians or subway musicians, the reason why many of them sound as good as they do is that these are pros. Many of them enjoy playing down there. The acoustics in some of the subway stations are amazing. Some of these tunnels, especially the tunnel on 14th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue, there's this long tunnel, the whole length of the block, and it has this incredible reverberations. And it's a choice spot. When you get there with your instrument, you'll often find another musician is already there, because they know that in that there's a spot right in the middle, the sweet spot that just sounds so beautiful, and it fills the whole station with the echoing music of whether it's a guitar or a banjo or a violin. I've seen people drag their pianos down there. They'll have keyboards down there, or trumpets that just echo and fill the station. Wow. Anyhow, that's the protagonist. She begins in the very first chapter. We see her playing her music down in the subway, and in her case, she actually is somewhat desperate. She doesn't have any other job waiting for her when she arrived in the city, so that's how she's making ends meet and paying the rent and paying for food, is just by playing for hours every day on the street corners and bars, open microphones where she passes the hat around, and that's how we are introduced to Isabel in the first chapter.
Yes, Isabel's character is very interesting because she, that takes a lot of guts to go cross country by yourself and going where you don't know. But her background is also interesting, because she is a child of immigrants. Mm-hmm. Then she doesn't know, if I can remember correctly, Eric, if her parents were here legally. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, that's a little bit vague, isn't it? We don't learn until the very end of the first chapter, that she wasn't simply hitchhiking to the big city, but that she was running away from something back in Detroit in the Midwest. Her father has recently died of the plague, COVID, or some other plague yet to come. But her mother had been deported when she was a little girl. The ICE police came and knocked on her door one morning, and without further warning, just put her mother in handcuffs and took her away. She never saw her mother again. And it was always very confusing, obviously heartbreaking, and she's traumatized, but she was also left guessing, like, what's going on? Why? What do they want my mother for? Anyway, what did my mother do? Why are they taking my mother away? So the story gradually starts having more and more of these flashbacks, and we start to learn Isabel's backstory. And, not to give much of it away, but it's a very contemporary tale. It's really about not just New York City, but America living in the 21st century and surviving as an artist in the 21st century.
Yes, and I liked, Eric, in your book, I don't like to give a lot of it away because folks, you have to read this book. it shows how people like Isabel in her situation can get taken advantage of by business people and who exploit them and threaten them.
That's right. Even when she finds success, even when she's making, signed to a record label and she's performing in these large venues, she doesn't realize at first that, yes, she's certainly being exploited and manipulated by her manager and the record label, the producer, etc. So she's gradually learning the ropes, but learning, as most of us do, learning all of these life lessons the hard way. And she's really not sure what her status is. That is her immigration status. Both her parents are gone. She's on her own. Her father, she thinks, was born in the U.S., and she thinks she was born here, which means that once you're in, right? But that's called into question now. She's not certain. She doesn't remember, and she's kind of afraid to ask anyone. And she certainly doesn't have any proof, any documents. She's technically undocumented. She doesn't have her papers in order. She thinks she's probably legit, but she's afraid to ask. So that's this uncertainty that she has to live with, and that many Americans have to live with. A pretty large percentage of the population is feeling quite vulnerable.
Yes.
And the new president who was just sworn in is now raising the specter of maybe ending birthright citizenship for the first time. First time in history that I know of, where even if you're born here, you may be vulnerable to deportation based on what the whims of the president and other politicians, how desperate politicians are to find a scapegoat and to distract the general public away from their economic reality and just blame it on someone else. Someone else is supposedly taking your job or some nonsense like that.
When you take someone like Isabel, the one of the characters in the story, and she's afraid to tell what's going on, and people do live in fear. Oh, I can't report this because I could be undocumented, or I am undocumented. Actually, I live in New Jersey, and diverse community in New Jersey. And there was a doctor, a medical doctor, who was fined for doing illegal hiring for her domestic help. And the poor woman needed medical help, and she made her still work. This was a medical doctor. So can you just imagine what goes on in other industries? I have to ask you this, Eric, because one of the characters, as you said, is based on yourself, is the artist in the book. Did you get started by painting down in the subways?
Well, I did a lot of street art when I was younger, starting as a teenager. I still do some street art, but yes, different forms of graffiti, mostly stencil graffiti in my case. I'd go out after midnight in the streets of Lower Manhattan with a can of spray paint a stencil that I had already cut of silhouettes of different figures, mysterious figures. And I got a little older, into my 20s, I started doing it as street posters. That is, spending a lot of time with it, drawing it at home, printing them up on paper, and then, again, going out after midnight, the streets of Lower Manhattan, and pasting them up on brick walls and lampposts and all over Manhattan. I found that in a crowded city like New York, if your poster stays up and doesn't get covered up by another poster and stays up, for a few days, thousands of people will see it. Tens of thousands will see it if the poster remains up for a week or two. Sometimes they stay up for months. So that was the thrilling thing for a young artist, is that artists want exposure. They want people to see their work is the most important thing, way more important than making any money off of it. That comes later. The first step is, can you even successfully get what's in your head out onto the page, onto the piece of paper or the canvas, as it were. And then another thing is, can you connect? Can you be sharing it with other people? I always like to take it directly to the public, a cross section of the public. Because being a native New Yorker, I surrounded by such a wide range of humanity that doing art that would wind up simply in a gallery or a museum always seemed so limited to me. I noticed early on that it's only a certain type of person who even goes into a gallery or a museum. It's generally just a certain class of people. It's usually a certain limited ethnic groups who regularly visit these places. I myself rarely go into gallery. I don't feel exactly comfortable or even particularly welcome in art galleries. Isn't that interesting? Why wouldn't I be? I mean, if I'm not welcome, who is? But that's the point, is I'm very aware that it's this kind of awkward situation going into a pretentious place with ridiculously expensive pictures on the wall. So for all of these reasons, although I do have art shows and do have work in museums, I've spent a lot of time just really concentrating on getting my work in front of the general public, getting work printed up, mass-produced. That's why I've done all these, covers for the New Yorker magazine, for one. I've done dozens of New Yorker covers in recent years, and I feel like I'm communicating to a much wider range of the public. But, of course, even the New Yorker is a certain demographic. So I continue to do the street poster routine, which I started as a 18-year-old. I'm still doing that now from time to time. If I feel strongly about something, I have something to say, either politically or socially or culturally, I'll go out and just start putting them up on the streets, on the city streets. And this way, you're guaranteed to be communicating with the cross section of the public. Everyone will be seeing the pictures. If you post it right on a busy intersection in a busy city, right near a subway station or a bus stop or something, not only will thousands of people see it, but there'll be all kinds of people will be seeing it, right? Rich people, poor people, fat people, skinny people, black people, white people, right? Everyone, smart people, stupid people, beautiful people, ugly people, every type of person will see it. And I'm always, frankly, Betsy, always surprised how few artists choose to do this. That is, take their work directly to the public. That's what I thought. That's what so much of my work is about. I want to feel like I'm communicating with other members of my species, and not just other members in my family or ethnic group or class group, or neighborhood, but a really wide range. But hey, maybe I'm strange that way. Again, I think it has everything. I think it has everything to do with growing up in Manhattan, which was such a multicultural city. I really, trace it back to that. That to me, that just seems normal. If I find myself in an environment that just has one type of person in it over and over again, I feel like there's something wrong with this picture. It's strange. Where are all the other people at? How come it's only only men in this? Where are the ladies at? How come it's only young people? Where are the older people at? How come where are the black people? Where are the Jewish people at? I'm just used to being in environments where everyone is sort of represented to some degree. All kinds of people are constantly passing through and are part of the conversation. That's my favorite thing about New York. My favorite thing by far. It's not the buildings or the beautiful bridges or anything like that. It's the people, the amazing assortment of people that we get, especially in New York City. I suppose in any big cosmopolitan city, but especially in New York. I'm so grateful that I was born and raised there and grew up there on the East Side, the Lower East Side, which is an unusually multicultural neighborhood. Even by New York standards, it's probably the most ethnically diverse neighborhood in New York. So I feel really lucky. And I didn't even notice that. I thought that was just everywhere was like that. It wasn't until I got into my 20s and 30s that it occurred to me that, hey, this is kind of an unusual neighborhood. Other neighborhoods are not mixed this way, or I visit other cities or other rural parts of the country where things are utterly segregated. You have just people, just white Christians living over here for hundreds of thousands of miles, as far as the eye can see. Or you'll have, just Latino neighborhood segregated over here, or just a black neighborhood over here. You have neighborhoods like that in New York. Of course, they're always changing, and black neighborhoods like Harlem or Bed-Stuy have been largely gentrified and replaced by other ethnic groups that have more money. Or black people, the black bourgeoisie, displaces the working class black people. It's so complex in a big city, and most of it goes by, and we don't even really think of it. We're oblivious to it. But when you stay in one place for many decades, and you have any type of analytical ability or just curiosity or critical thinking, you start to realize, hey, this is pretty fascinating. Just the economic changes that are going on right before my eyes.
Yes.
I think cast of characters, just from a Shakespearean point of view. It's all the world is a stage, right?
And New York definitely is.
It's a stage, but then the cast of characters are constantly changing. People exit stage left, and a new person shows up on stage right, and it's constantly changing. It's constantly kaleidoscopic is a word I've been using lately. So I tried to make this story, Naked City, I tried to make it as kaleidoscopic and to represent the different types of people who I've known growing up in the city. And it's also very much an expose of New York City. That's the title, Naked City. It's also making
I feel,
fun
Eric,
of,
in my opinion, you captured New York City, the energy, the buildings. I love
That's
how
what
you
I
did
was
the
going
different
for. Yeah.
Yeah.
The different kind of buildings. The
different kind
the
of
19th
buildings.
century tenements,
Yes.
and then the 21st century towers, right?
Yep.
The towers going up right next to them or right across the street.
The different colors.
The buildings are just symbols. The buildings are just represent the type of humanity itself. They're all built and designed by people, and these towers are symbols of the changing face of humanity and the economic fortunes of old building that gets demolished, and then a new building goes up in its place with a whole new cast of characters. So I suppose that the characters that we zero in on here, the 3 or 4 protagonists here are all, most of them are artists, right? A musician, a painter, and a street dancer. But all of them are asking a similar question, and that is, they're asking, is it possible to survive as an artist in the 21st century? It's an open question. That's the question the book asks. It's not clear. The only thing that's clear is that it's extremely difficult. How many artists or creative people do you know now in 2025 who are actually able to pay the rent and pay for food and survive as artists in the 21st century? Maybe they were able to get away with it in the 1960s or 70s or even 10 years ago, but things have gotten so challenging now. Well, for working people across the board, of course, and artists are just in the end, are just working people. But they're the group of working people that I'm familiar with. They say, write what you know. Well, I feel like I'm only qualified to write about my experience. What is my livelihood? I'm a cultural worker, artist, and many of my friends have also been, in addition to school teachers and firemen and policemen and people I grew up with and went to school with. A lot of the people I spend time with are musicians or teachers. In fact, most of the artists I know, they're not able to make a living with their art. They're teachers. They're art teachers, or they teach music, and that's the way they support themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's an ancient tradition of that. I know Johann Sebastian Bach used to support himself with teaching people how to play the piano and teaching them the violin. And
well, I'm sure it's very, very difficult now, and very competitive.
As we know, teaching itself is difficult, and it's an art form. If you're doing it right, it's a high. Teaching is an art form itself. And yes, so I'm trying to include, or at least make reference to these different lines of work. With the street dancer, what is her name? Alex. She mentions at one point that her mother is a poet up in the Bronx, and when Isabel asks her, and did she actually makes a living writing her poetry? And Alex cracks up and goes, no, of course not. No, she teaches public school for a living.
And that's a whole another subject. I want to talk about the one armed squeegee guy, squeegee washing window.
He's really the final character who we're introduced to, isn't he? The squeegee guy.
I liked his character. I really did. I felt like he was like almost like mysterious, but he was a big fella. You drew him as a very muscular broad-shouldered,
man. Right? Yes.
Yes, doing the windows with one arm, and I feel like I could relate to him because he was different, and people didn't accept him, but the people in the book did. I think if I can remember, he was kicked out of somewhere. Did he go to art gallery, some kind of gallery? And
by the end, yeah. But you don't want to give that away.
Right.
The final pages. Yeah. But it's true. He's the most mysterious character. We don't really learn too much of his backstory. A little bit. I mean, a little bit gradually. He tells us, but he kind of represents he's the everyman. The man, he's literally the man in the street. He's out there. He loses his window washing job, washing the windows of high-rise buildings because when he loses one of his arms, he loses his job, and he's reduced to just washing car windows. He's one of those squeegee men who we pass on the street. We'll be driving along and we have to stop at a red light, and then, here comes a dude with a squeegee. He wants to wash my window, even though my window is perfectly clean. He's here with his spray bottle. Here he comes now, right? It's inevitable, especially in New York. I always wondered about those guys since childhood. my father would go, oh no, mister, please. And he'd roll down the window, give the guy a quarter just to leave. Right?
I vaguely remember them. Yeah.
We remember them, right? There was no shortage of these squeegee men, and people, motorists would often give them money so that they wouldn't wash their windows. But as a child, I was always very curious and felt a kind of empathy to them. They were clearly desperate. They clearly wouldn't be doing this if they had some other way to make money. So that always stayed with me, and I was always curious to know more about one of these people. Of course, there's no shortage of homeless people in all of these big cities, but specifically the guys who wash the windows, cars. How do they wind up in that position, and where did they even get a hold of the squeegee from? And are they able to support themselves this way? And so he ends up being in a way, the center of the story. By the last chapter, we realize that in his own way, he's a very creative, poetic individual. But this is he considers himself an artist of survival. Simply, the daily art of survival is a high art form for him, and he's got a few things to say about it.
Yes, you have very interesting characters in your book, and I don't want to give away the story, but folks, you have to get this book. How did you get your art, or how did your art get noticed to be in these museums, Eric? Because that's quite an accomplishment.
Yes, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen overnight. You don't just
sure doesn't.
In the Guggenheim Museum, like when you're still a teenager, but all different ways. I got more stories about that that would be another conversation. But I'm always surprised when I end up in my work gets in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art or the Whitney Museum or most recently the Library of Congress. As much as I complain, all of us complain about the government, whether we're left wing or right wing or center, we're always dissatisfied. The government is doing everything the wrong way, and they don't have their priorities straight. And yet, the Library of Congress, that's a branch of the U.S. government. And they recently have bought the artwork, all the original artwork from my first 2 graphic novels. It has wound up there, and the property of the U.S. government, which paid me pretty well, and it's just sitting there in their archive in Washington, D.C., which means that unlike a typical museum where we have to pay to get in, you could enter for free, and everyone has access. If you ask the librarian there at the Library of Congress, they'll you could sit you down at a table and bring the originals to you, and you could pore over them for hours. You could write a doctoral thesis about studying the artwork. So that's what I love about. Well, I love libraries in general. The fact that, again, they're open to the public, a cross section of the public. Anyone is eligible to get a library card. And then the Library of Congress is the ultimate. It's the ultimate public, where it's supported by the government. The U.S. government has this huge building. And it's a repository of all the books that they've collected, almost like a modern library at Alexandria, before it caught on fire. You wonder now, this is another open question, are libraries going to continue on? I mean, not only have the Republican agenda comes right out and says, oh, no, we don't believe in that kind of thing. You want books? Go to a bookstore, go to Amazon, buy it from Jeff Bezos. There ain't no free lunch. We're not just giving it away. That libraries represent free lunch to them, as does public education. They've made it very clear that they are opposed to the very concept of public education. If you want to go to school, you should have to pay big money for it. You shouldn't just have free education that's paid for by people's tax dollars, as we've had up till this point. But again, that's a whole other story, and time will tell. It all depends on how much people push back, right? Going back to this, one of the subjects in Naked City is that she's running scared. She doesn't know if she's documented or not. Maybe everything is cool. Maybe she's legitimate, but she's not quite certain. And as readers, we're not quite certain what her immigration status is. So there's that anxiety running through it. All we know now is that even the Republicans who voted for this current president are saying, well, yes, all of these illegal immigrants, they've got to go. We're going to deport millions of them. But some of the Republican governors are starting to say, whoa, wait a minute now. We could deport thousands of people, but at a certain point, our economy, our state economy, the economy of, say the state of Texas or Florida or California or New York is really dependent on this cheap labor that immigrants provide, and always has been from day one, from back in slavery times. They depend on free labor or cheap labor. So that's the big contradiction that's going to gradually come up. Now, not only in this story, if you read Naked City, but what's about to unfold in the public sphere in America now, where if the government deports people, well, then that was the cheap labor. That means that means you believe in paying people a fair wage. You're going to have to pay people more now. Illegal immigrants, you don't have to pay them much of anything because they can't complain. They can't join a labor union. They can't complain and demand a minimum wage. They're running scared. So if they're out of the picture and it's only native-born, actual, real, true Americans or white people who were there to get those jobs, well, then you have to pay them really well. And Trump has already established that he doesn't believe in paying people well. It was revealed that the people who work right there in Trump Tower, the maids, the people who clean Trump Tower, and many of them were technically illegal immigrants. And of course he hires them because he's always trying to get a cheap deal, as most people with money are. So how is he going to bridge that contradiction? Time will tell. But I'm just limiting, as an artist, I'm just limiting myself to this fictional story, and it's a comedy at that. I'm playing around with some of these themes that our culture and our society is finding ourselves in. Some of these contradictions. And of course, it's contradictions and conflict are always what make a good storyline.
Well, it is a great story. Eric, as we wind up here, where can people purchase Naked City, a graphic novel?
Well, it's available anywhere, wherever books are sold. If you have a local independent bookstore, I always like to support the indie store, but you could get it online. It's available. If they don't have it in your local bookstore, you could just request it. They'll order it for you. You could buy it online, of course, where you could buy anything. If you're interested in buying a signed copy for no additional money, you could buy it directly through my website. I've sold hundreds of them that way. Yeah, I sign it and I draw a little picture, an original drawing for you in there. And so that's another way. You could always just go directly to my website and just click the button and get it that way. But yeah, book. I recommend supporting your local bookstore.
And what's your website, Eric, where people can connect with you on your website?
Oh yeah, it's real simple. It's just Drooker.com. My last name, Drooker, Drooker, Drooker.com. It's a fun visit anyway to the website. You'll see a lot of work that will be very familiar to you just from all the New Yorker covers over the years and other magazine and album covers that I've done over the years. A lot of it will be familiar to the listeners. But if you like the New Yorker covers, this book, Naked City, it's like a New Yorker cover come to life. It's a whole sequence of dozens and hundreds of images of New York, done in that style, all drawn and painted by a native New Yorker who was born and raised there on the east side of Manhattan Island, and it's very much of an expose of what goes on under the hood, under the surface layers of a big city, and that's why I'm calling it Naked City. And of course, there are naked people in the store. The characters themselves are naked. Yeah,
yes, they are.
Well, Isabel is so she's not able to make a living playing her music at first, so she gets a job as an artist's model, and she's posing for the artist. And then we get to know the painter, and he becomes one of the protagonists himself. So each one of the characters we see, if not literally naked, then in an extremely vulnerable state. There's that second dictionary definition of naked, is to just be stripped bare, to be in a vulnerable state, as all of us are. And the very city itself and our society itself, especially these days, is in a very vulnerable position indeed.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you, Eric.
Which is why we need comedy.
Yes.
Hey, thank you.
Comedy is very important.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm grateful, and thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed the book and that you were able to follow the story through the chapters, through all of the different twists and turns.
I loved it. My son loved it. I'm going to give it to his friend who's in the artist, trying to be an artist. And I told her about you. And, folks, I highly recommend this book. The ending, I'm not going to give it away, is really a twist. Eric does a wonderful, wonderful job. Amazingly talented author, writer, artist. I could go on and on. But his work speaks for himself. Go on his website and look at all his work. I always like to tell people to go on the guest website to learn more about the guest and what I can
enjoy looking at the
say.
Free pictures on the website. No pressure. You could just. I have a lot of sample pages from the book. You could just look at it, and if you get curious and want to see more, you could get a hold of the book. Get the book from the library, for that matter. I like people to go use the public libraries have all of my books. But you could just enjoy looking at the pictures right through Drooker.com, and you'll go, oh, yes, I saw that one on the newsstand, or I saw that on the New Yorker cover in my dentist's office last week. That one jumped out at me. I didn't realize that the guy also does whole books, whole graphic novels of stories. And they're funny. I think all of us need a little humor right about now. Right? Comedy, I think, is very much of a survival mechanism for me. Right? It's a survival tactic.
Comedy. Yes, I've learned to have a very dark, twisted sense of humor in my caregiving days, Eric. It kept me going. Let me tell you, you have to laugh.
Yes. You
and you can
laugh.
and
you
cry.
Can cry.
Yes.
All of the emotions,
Yes.
Use the full emotional palette when painting the pictures in this book. So I guess it would most accurately be described as a tragic comedy. That would be more accurate, right? It's not a full-blown The painter character is a comic character. He's the comic relief. He's a Chaplin-esque character. But Isabel is having a really rough time. Isabel's story is really a good bit more serious, and she's in a more desperate situation. So there's some tragic elements, but then it kind of is balanced out with some pretty hilarious incidents which happen throughout the chapters of the story.
Yes, well, thank you, Eric, for coming on. I'm going to spell Eric's last name.
You're welcome.
Eric is E-R-I-C, and the last name is spelled D-R-O-O-K-E-R. Drooker. Thank you, Eric, for coming on. The name of the book
You're
is
quite
Naked
welcome.
City.
Thank you.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
I enjoyed the conversation. I feel we got.
I did too.
a pretty wide range of subject matter we covered in a brief period of time.
And you're welcome to come back. Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking to you. Folks, I'll tell you, my first graphic novel, I can't wait for Eric to do another one and to interview him again.
I'm in the middle of the next one now. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the next one. So give me another year or two, and then you could have me back.
Great. And if you don't want to wait until then, you could always come back, and we could discuss your book, Naked City.
Well, thanks again, Betsy.
More.
Enjoy.
You're welcome, Eric.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and stay warm there on the East Coast.
Thank you.
Polar
Thanks,
vortex.
Eric.
Yes. I hope my book will keep people warm.
Well, a good book to read by a fireplace if you have one. And that makes a great gift. Candlelight, yes. And it makes a great gift also, folks, any time of the year. And all the information about Eric Drooker will be in the blog that Jeannie White, who's the station manager, writes, produces the show. And I want to thank everyone for listening. Please share this show to help other people. And I also want to tell you that it is free to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy on Amazon, Spreaker, Amazon Music, that is, Apple, iHeart. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, who is CEO of Pastoral Talk Radio Network, who makes this all possible. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you can be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever before. Thanks for listening. Till we chat again, this is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Pastoral Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Bye-bye now.